they're holding it down very well vocally in the track. That was freaking awesome. That was awesome, guys. Hi everybody, my name is Jessica Holyfield. I'm a professional dancer, professional dance choreographer, and dance educator based out of the southeast of the United States. And we're going to be taking a look at RIIZE's newest dance practice called Saxy. I'm going to assume there's going to be a saxophone of some kind being integrated within the track just because of the wordplay alone. I have been following RIIZE since their debut, so this is definitely one of the comebacks that I was very intrigued on seeing. This is technically their first comeback, I would say, or maybe a part of a whole album collection. I don't know how SM's doing it with the new generations, but I think we're now officially transitioning into Generation 5 with K-pop. So I think that's kind of interesting, just seeing from where I started in Gen 2 to what it is now in Gen 5. It's just so interesting, you know, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what we're gonna see here. So let's go ahead and take a look. Oh. I like the transition choices. Yeah, there's that saxophone. That foot, that heel toe was really cool here. Yeah. The musicality choices that they're making here is really fun, and I'm not used to seeing in the K-pop realm, you know. Love it. I saw that kind of kick variation I saw with 17 before. Ooh, you see how far he dropped there? Wow, the transitions are just so interesting. Ooh. Ooh. You trying to do the WAP right there? Wow. Yeah, they have nuances of being K-pop idols, obviously, but I really feel like we're watching just the vibe of this choreography is so not in the K-pop realm. Like, I think they're going to be sacrificing their vocals a lot for this routine, and I'll get into it when we watch it. But I know that's a trend with these newer generations, like, they're not catering so much to the live performance as much as more of the performance side, the dancing, more than the singing. But it's not negating the fact that they're holding it down very well vocally in the track. That was freaking awesome. That was awesome, guys. I really liked that. Okay, we're gonna take a look back from the top here. Now, I did call it, we did hear a lot of the saxophone, and it was, you know, it was what I was expecting in that regard, but definitely is a dun 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 na 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 na, more so that than yeah. Just, it has, like, not riffs, but, like, there's some runs to it, you know? And it's a pretty tricky pocket a hit, honestly. Da, 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 da. Like, you want to think higher up, kind of like that. And I think they did a good job of really trying to emulate that. How they go, and they do a very small curtain reveal just with two of our guys showcasing our first feature. They peeled out to the side, very small, subtle movement there. It appears that they were doing, yeah, so they went da-da, you know, and that was from your outside people. Here is what's created that. They switched places, revealing he's the only person that was still. So that's where you naturally want to look if for your feature would be that guy right there, right? So I like that running, boom, and then they kind of built it small and on that crash, really transitioning it forward. It's just, I don't know. I think it's because it's so complex, a lot of the polyrhythmic isolations that they're doing, I won't even call it animation. It's not even that. It's more so whenever you're having this isolations moving in opposition, they're doing a lot of those types of grooves, which is going to affect your torso a lot. And so I really think that this choreography does not have singing in mind. That's really my main point. I low-key want to see what the MR removed of this is like, because I bet you they're probably really out of breath. Regardless of how fatigued you are, there are certain things with the group that you have to factor in, and I would think that they're not thinking about the vocals as much whenever they do this live. Is really how I feel. If you just look here, some of them are taking a more stiffer approach with the torso, some are angling it up more, revealing another feature here, which I like. It's just nice having surprises, because remember, I mean, I have seen all of the performances from RIIZE, especially since debut, but I'm not familiar with them. Like, I'm not a fan. Does that make sense? Like, I'm an observer, and I'm a spectator, and I'm an analyzer of the choreography. So I really try to not have as much of a biasness to them, because I can't be as objective. Does that make sense? Now, I am a fan of groups. That's a whole video I've already talked through with Gen 2. But I really like their choreography. I like the choreographers that they've chosen for them. I think it fits them very well. You know, but all of this here, when they hit the boom, 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 they hit the rebounds, and they choose to use using more popping technique to emphasize that texture. I really like still having your feature in the middle, everybody else bringing it down, popping it back up, then switching to a smoother texture. That right there, da 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 da. I'm not used to seeing those types of transitions. Normally I see that at like a dance convention, like a Monsters or somewhere like that, Chaos. I normally don't, or like a strict dance concept. I'm not really used to seeing it in a K-pop transition, because it's just such a tricky pocket to hit, but this song is tricky in and of itself, so it makes sense why this choice was made. That right there, you know, and I like having with the footwork and how people are in opposition. You know, it's just dun 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 dun. So there's like a hold, and then they drop it into something faster, into their more intricacies with the upper body. That right there, do 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 do. You know, that's just, you ain't gonna be thinking about your vocals there, you know, but there's a good chance that he's probably cutting out. And that's also another thing, is your features are joining right in with everybody else. In the intricacies, it's not like they are marking while they're holding their tune in comparison to everybody else. It's kind of, they're all doing it, which is probably what's making me feel the way that I feel, of they are not really thinking about doing this live vocally, but you know, to each their own. That was a really smart choice. I'd seen it a little earlier with another group, where you have one person to demonstrate that they're the feature. They move in opposition compared to everybody else. And so now when you see here in the still cut I have, you have people, you know, they're moving in opposition, but like the whole transition prior to this mirroring taking place, you had your feature in center moving kind of against the grain, right? That right there, they all boom, choose the bass to switch over, and then they mirrored. So I really like that. It also, the fact that I have to pause and I had to go back to really make sure that's what was happening, just shows kudos to the transitions and choreography team, whether they puzzle pieced it or if it was one person in charge of it. Really great, cohesive. I love how they choose to feature everybody. I like that doom doom ch, and it's digestible, but it's still heavily complex for a K-pop track. It really is. Like, there's high energy, and then there's complexity, and this one has a lot of complexity to it. But it's kind of what I was expecting though, since from what I've seen in the past. You know, that doo-doo, like they're doing a lot of tension holds and then dropping them out into a different pocket. And I really like that. Yeah, all of this here. I mean, one thing that would make me possibly think, okay, they could probably do this live, is that for a lot of this section here, a lot of them are locking up their torsos, and it's mostly the extremities that are coming into play for how they are executing the extra version of the step. So personally, I mean, this section right here, it could just be preference of the choreography, but this one is more uptight in posture than what we've seen earlier. Like, it's just very different, but also the part of the music slightly different, so I think that's okay that they're doing that, because they're not doing it the whole time. Even the small head movements that we see here was super cool when you go back. That they all leaned in different directions, and then they looked in a different direction as well, and that's what kind of prompted it feels, it's structured, but also it feels not typical, and I think that's what I like. And it's something I'm noticing with Gen 5 specifically, or people who are promoting in the Gen 5 realm, that you have a lot of old school fundamentals being meshed together with new school viral variations. And I saw that with 17 recently, and I'm seeing it here where you have some of these transitions are, you know, they're based in more that old school rock and bounce, but how they're revving it up, it's matching the timbres that are corresponding to the new generations of music production. So I think that's something that I feel I really like. That my hope is that those who are doing these choreographies and those who are choreographing are respectfully citing their source in the fundamentals that stem from the variations that they're bringing here in this realm. That's what my hope always is, and you're not going to get that from everybody, but at least with who I react to, I can tell whenever there's some nuance of, I see that they've trained in the fundamental parent style outside of just the groove that we're seeing. That right there, I love that little bounce, and they do that a couple times. It's just a sick transition, you know? This is their breather little section, but notice how they went from everybody on the same level, just dropping down without stopping the choreography, dropping into a 3-tier level. So whenever we start here, they're all on the same level. Right there, that little da-na-na-na, you know, they all start at the same level, and then watch. Next group. Sorry, I accidentally pushed the wrong button. Let me go back. Sorry for yeah. Okay, so we're here. That right there. So then you have two people. You know what may have happened? I think one of my guys dropped a little too early. What I would have thought would have been cool is if these two dropped first and then these two dropped to join them based on that micro timing that happened after. So, but you know, I think that was still cool nonetheless. Taking it out. So that was a really nice way they chose to feature their next person. He's coming from the corner, and notice that he's bringing his way through here. There's kind of a gap right here, but everybody else is not looking front except for him. He's projecting forward, and I think those are really nice cues that you're trained in. And also a lot of people have been giving them mad props for the fact that they are very young in not young in age, but young in age as idols, like officially debuted idols. Their groups age, the age of RIIZE, is only like 2 months, right? And so the fact that they have this level of quality behind the choreography, the synchronization, because that takes time to build fingerprints with each other and how you choose to hold your postures together in synchronicity, but also how they, you know, how we're seeing them cultivated just as a group is definitely more on the mature side, which I partially feel, and we can discuss this, I partially think it's because all of them are adults, you know, and that's a completely separate video entirely, but that's something that I've always enjoyed about watching them and feeling comfortable really trying to be objective on the good, the bad, and the ugly of the choreography sometimes. Not really, I haven't really encountered anything negative yet, but I like the fact that they're all adults. So I feel like I'm not sit here micro criticizing a child, because I don't like doing that, and I teach children, so it's just I'm more sensitive to that realm. But anyway, going back to here, you notice how he did footwork to transition back to his spot, but also notice with everybody else they kind of they collaborated with that, but you notice that the formation, they technically just we're hitting a different part of the music. So they took a polyrhythmic approach. He's handling more tone, which I appreciate because he's the feature, so it's a little bit easier to really hone that in. But everybody else here, they're choosing to go about more in the percussion in the back and the saxophone. And so that's really nice. When you have a group, you can play around with your polyrhythms of it's 2 or more sounds that are happening at the same time that are different, which is most music that you hear today. I love it when groups take that because it shows that they're in the music, not just riding on top of it on the layers that are predictable. So this right here, that pop down, doom, 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 and then they keep going. You know, so it's nice as you have your key moments, but then they do really tricky transitions and they try to hit the musicality and then they drop back into the groove. And those are little notions that I'm talking here, that little pom, 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 pom with the heel. Let's take a look at that real quick. I love that it goes heel toe to going rum pum pum pum, and they took the gun rum pum pum pum, doing wordplay on making it sound like a gun. Super cool. Then he does the other way, rum pum pum pum. He has more of a nuanced personality to it, so that's super fun. And then they're like talking sexy, like this right here is like they're utilizing it with their lips. So I think that's kind of fun. And this right here has that more viral TikTok aesthetic about it. And I know that's probably what the trend is, because that's where if your song's going to be successful, it has to trend on TikTok. So naturally you want your dances to be challenges. And so this is definitely a regression in difficulty in comparison to the polyrhythmic musicality extravaganza we saw in verse 1. So this is fun, and I'm not saying it's easy at all. It's definitely more intermediate, but when you saw the complexity of some of their advanced concepts in the beginning, this reads more intermediate, which is why I say what I say, you know. And it's more in unison, too, and that's how you can tell that, too. I love that, how they went from my one guy saying the key point, talk Saxy, and then he started and everybody dropped into it. That was freaking sick, what we saw there. So they bring it over. So then it talks Saxy. He moves first, then everybody else do. And notice whenever he starts talking, he doesn't do anything with his hands. That's because the hands, they were catching that trap. When he didn't need to, because he didn't have a trap to justify it, so he just neutralized. And then he approached forward as everybody else caught the trap. That's just really smart choreographically. And now we're back to the complexity. We're messing around with different formations. We're hitting the beat the way that we want. And I really feel like we're seeing RIIZE is that more, this is RIIZE. This isn't RIIZE catering to the public. You know what I mean? And I really like that. This is cool. A little playing, boom. They drop it down. Now, this was the first basic transition we saw. They just kind of walked, but even though they had a slight chest ISO that we noticed from a couple of them, it wasn't 100% as clean as it needed to be there. But now you have your basic feature in the corner. He tailored it back to the rest of the group. Just this part, just the rotation of me having to utilize the back to get that rotation the way you need it to go, and then proceeding forward into our next member. That's the little things that I'm talking about, that it's like abnormally difficult in range that you have to think about, even though you're a singer, you know? And that's just major props and kudos to that, the fact that that I'm even discussing that here in this video. You know, June, da-da-na-na, you know, so they're going here and then they're creating a really strict, stiff staccato to shift over back into a legato. So their texture shifts are very, very quick on the turnaround. And that's another thing too. Normally you have people write out a phrase before they switch textures. They're switching textures in the 2s and the 4s and the evens and in the odds and the upbeats and downbeats. So they're playing around with all of that, which is why I'm very impressed with it. And those who choose to cover RIIZE, that's definitely going to be something that that's going to be a trouble spot if you're not really fluent in dancing. But you do K-pop dance covers, right? I mean, I feel like there's such a wide range of difficulty. Obviously, this would be teetering more towards that intermediate advanced, not the whole thing, but at least the verses I would say are a little bit more on the upper intermediate, lower advanced side for sure. I love that where they had my 2 and then did the claps and then they broke apart to now reveal subtly our next group ready to go. I like that kick. I've seen that very recently. 17 did a variation with the kick trying to hit a certain part of the music. So I'm just more sensitive to it. Not saying by any means that there was a copying that took place. No, I'm just saying that within the trend of the comebacks that we're seeing, that kick to hit that timbre is something that I'm used to seeing. In that reveal too, I've just been saturated in it recently. That kick drop. So that's an example of that. Reminded me of an ATL stomp, but I don't think that's what they did. They did more of a heel taps and then they dropped it in the pocket. So I think that it's just little things, little baby things like that. That was freaking sick. Do you see how low he went? So he hit mid, then he dropped it and came back up. That's another thing as to why, if he's my feature and he's the one talking right now, why in the world would he do that and also sing at the same time? The amount of like, it's because you would need to be good at pistol squats in order to hit something like that well and efficiently like that. And so just the amount of control that's needed in your core is substantial to be able to execute something like that quickly. You know, that kick down into a smeeze into an ATL stomp variation. I wouldn't even call it that. It's more like a heel tap. He drops. Doon. Yeah, it's just like he did not stop at all. Then he continues to drop down. Now we have a new feature in play. Also, knowing that he was still our feature, he chose to remain mirrored as everybody else, tailored more towards the right, which I really like. It's just, it makes it easy for me to be able to see who the feature is. I shouldn't have to rely upon your mouth moving to know that you're my feature. It's a, what is the framing of everybody else in the formations? What's happening with the camera work? What's happening in the levels and dynamics and content itself? And so they're doing a great job of making it very easy for me to know who I'm looking for. And like I've already said, I don't study these groups outside of the reactions that I make. I watch the video. I keep it as objective as possible, looking at these are people who are dancing, you know, regardless of their scope as a dancer. I look, are they hitting whatever pocket they're doing as authentically as they could? Is the choreography up to snuff, matching musicality with their track? Do I think that I understand why they made the choices that they do, or why the formations work? And do I see my features the way they need to be seen? Are the formations working? Are the dynamics working? That's what I look at. So I don't really rely upon my knowledge of, oh, I know who this person is, to be like, oh, that's the one singing. And it shouldn't be that way, especially if you're a newer group, or if you're a group and you want to continue to expand and grow and let people in, you know, regardless of how long you've been around. I think that's a really good thing to factor in and not just rely upon, oh, we've been around long enough. And I'm not saying this is the case here. It's just my little tangent on how you choose to feature someone matters, not just, don't rely upon somebody's bias to be like, oh yeah, they're for sure being featured, is my whole point. But this whole transition was really cool. It feels kind of fast forward a little bit. This part was really hard to hear musically, so I'm actually turning it up and I have to hear it again. It sounds like he's going off the wordplay, but the wordplay is kind of in the back, and because we're hearing the track being played in the studio and it's not actually just audio overlay, it's really hard to know what he's hitting. But, I mean, honestly, it is really nice the choice that he chose to throw his hands up here. When everybody else kept him down, it was still easy for me, even though he was in the column with everybody else. That's another instance of a really great call for him. I still know he's the one being featured because of his mannerisms, even though he's in a formation where he can easily disappear into the group itself. So it's little things like that I'm really appreciating about this. That right there, doom, 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 like that's just really nice musicality. And then they went from doom 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 into more of a legato neutral position to bring it back into the runs that happen with the saxophone. Now we're back into the focal point choreo, but notice the first time I was in unison, but here it's now framed out. So you have your corner people, and that's why it looks so different, even though it's the same choreo. They're not popping off the exact same way because I stopped it. We're having some cleanliness issues here in the second chorus, but it makes sense because this is a more complex approach to it. You have your two diagonals, then you have a mini group here. In the very beginning, everybody was facing the same depth, but here people are facing in and out and forward. So you're crossing multiple planes, you know, and now they ended up switching people around. They're hitting it. Now we're back into unison. That right, rum pom pom pom. He even chose to kind of do those mini chugs to go forward, and they're doing their key point. that little here, and then sexy, and they normally just go, you know, they drag it on, but here they kept it, they matched the exact part of the music they wanted to hit as they go through. That was cool. Notice what he did is everybody responded. So everybody over here responded. How I knew that he was my feature, my guy right here, was because he separated his arms a little bit more to make it look like he was controlling everybody else. So, and I love puppeting. I love a good trigger point, things like that. Those are super fun. Everybody else kept it together. He separated, boom, 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 and that's what you were able to tell that back into the legato groove, body rolls, transitioning it out. This is our chill moment. That moment right here, I will never not thank Mana Queen from Street Woman Fighter. Dope. They're because they've been dissed on it so much in the show. That's why. But here, I know that's not why it's in there. But it's just really fun to see it and just be remembered of that, you know. But I like having that little moment going around and then continuing forward. Now here's our bridge. We're like, we get to breathe because we have to be tense most of the time. So super fun. They're having more freedom because, you know, they did a lot of complex stuff. And then I bet the choreographer was like, okay, in the bridge, make sure you feature the right person and everybody else separate, go in different directions. And the only person that should be facing front is your feature. You know, because, and the reason why he's facing front, you guessed it, because he has something to say. What you say, right? And because I was about to make a note of that and be like, he's facing front too, so it's hard to know. But because he also is featured, it makes sense why they did what they did. And then my back person is about to be the next person. And that's how you can just tell with these. Everybody else is still moving to the side, or when they're done speaking, they end up moving and progressing on a pedestrian-like manner. And then the next person who's ready to speak is going to be projecting forward. And that's what we notice here. Now that's really cool where they go da-na-da-na-na-na. That's just a nice groove to build it back up, but notice that they're not in set spots until near the tail end of that. So I like it whenever people are allowed to have freedom and then they're told like a call time of when to be back to a spot, but they're not making it to where they're in that spot a little bit too early. It feels very nicely timed with everybody, and I really like that. And they do an interesting thing where they like to do a mini rotation of featuring different people based on who the feature is for that part or who's singing that part. And I like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And side note, I say this pretty much every group video at this point. Whenever it's an even number versus an odd number group. This is an odd number group I am seeing. So they're naturally able to frame out their choreography a lot nicer, because when you're dealing with one person being featured versus two, one person feature, it's a natural point in your choreo, and so you don't have to worry about putting someone directly behind or directly in front or somebody off stage, that kind of stuff, in order to maintain symmetry. So that's why this feels very symmetrical, and because they have an odd number and their feature is not going to stick out and they're not going to lose the symmetry because they have a feature sticking out as a single point. I will say they're starting to look a tad bit tired. Not everybody, but I would say my guy right here. He's starting to mark some movements, make them more internalized. So that's just my big note. And no, it's not because I stopped it the way that I did. That's just how he's doing it. You know, everybody else is really leaning it in. He's kind of bringing it in more internal. Here's our walk, getting ready to break it down. There's another puppeting moment. No, it's not puppeting. I know I keep saying that, but it's more like a controlling moment. Where he's using his hand and they're all looking with their focus. And that's another thing too, is if you allow your focus of those who are being controlled to factor into where somebody's arm placement or their reaction placement is heading, as an audience, we're naturally drawn to that as well. Hence why your feature is easier to be seen in those moments. The breakdown. Okay, so notice my guy in the center. There's a good chance people have told me before already, but he has really good body control. I can see little glimpses of popping technique and how he did it, because how you can tell is you see the reverberation of how he chooses to hit those moments. That little doom, 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 doom. He didn't just go arm placement. He added a little bit of that flexing in the torso and in the shoulders and in the arms, and that's how you can tell, because a lot of times, and whenever you're doing botting or when you're doing popping, you integrate tuts, and it's just easier, you know, it's tempting whenever you hit that boom, ding, ding, and you're hitting a staccato sound. It makes sense why you made that choice. That was cool when you hear that boom, that bass, that traveling bass, boom, they traveled their upper body over. That was super fun. That was cool. Dun, 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 dun. So it's just a simple rhythmic shift, but it was still really nice and clean. So I think they're tying it back together very well here. Yeah, just this whole ending sequence really nice. It's clean, it's full, it's exaggerated in movement, and so it feels like we're demonstrating a lot of different ranges of motion here, and we're riding a nice vibe of the track in the back. I can tell that we're having more of that, like you have people that are hitting, it's just more groovy here near this tail end. It doesn't have the saxophone more in the forefront like it was in the beginning. So them being able to hold out motions and movements, it really makes it feel a little bit better in collaboration with the music here. I like it with just a simple head nod, breaking it up. That drop down, he already said it, so I'll move on there. Boom, boom, clap. But now they're in a full formation with everybody. Very nice clean lines to finish this out. And also take note, we had one of our guys, you could tell he wanted to say something. That right there. He said that, I'm Saxy, and the reason why it looked that way and everybody else was kind of still, he's the only one who did it. He's the one who contributed forward, and then everybody else joined. Even though they all looked forward, it's because he stepped out and he became the outlier of the group for that moment, which is just a natural psychological thing. I love that, where instead of going front, they chose to go side. It just makes the move look different. I like that. My guy right here, I like his fit, firstly. And secondly, I like his personality and how he chooses to present himself in the choreography. It's fun, it's playful, but it's not overdone. And I like that specifically, so I want to make a note of that. They're partying, finishing up in a straight line. That's cool. Normally they do a da-da-da-da, like a triple, but they went dun-dun-dun-dun, so that's just syncopated. And that's the word I've been thinking about this whole time. Syncopation. They have a lot of syncopation in their isolations and then their polyrhythmic intention. And then normally we don't see syncopations in when somebody is a feature. And I think that's the biggest thing for me that feels impressive, but also makes me wonder if they ever intend to do this one live. Because I've heard mixed things from people with just the generation in general. And how they finish up, whoop, with the head, you know, that was great. This was super fun. I think it's definitely, it's just a great track from RIIZE, and I think everything I've heard from them, there's nothing that I dislike from their discography so far. So I think so, I mean, that's looking good. I like it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope I was helpful in some way. Like I've said, I've been a part of reacting to RIIZE since they debuted, and so I definitely feel more of a tie to really wanting to make sure that I stay up to date with them, to make sure that I'm reacting and seeing how they grow and progress through the different concepts they choose to pursue through being one of the first groups representing the 5th generation of the K-pop realm. So I'm definitely super excited to see what else they have to offer. This is not like 100% different than what we've seen from them, but it's definitely a different choreographic pocket that we've seen from them when it comes to difficulty. So I very much like that. Doesn't shock me at all, because I kind of could tell from their performance videos that they are capable of this kind of synchronicity. I know that, but it's just interesting to see just as a comeback or just as a representation of a track that they have. It's just, I don't know, it's just, you don't expect that from a very new group, you know? So, but anyway, I'm Jess. Thank you again for watching. If you want to see more K-pop content, street woman fighter, street man fighter, street dance China, dance content in general, I have it on YouTube, but I also have early access to all videos, including this one, on Patreon. If you want to go check that out, you can do so. But thank you again, and I will catch you on the flip side. Bye.